I really believe that spindle whorls are probably the most underrated tool that has ever been used by humanity. I mean, women literally took these to their graves. So a spindle whorl is part of the setup that you would need to spin yarn. And this is a very, very, very simple kind of setup. You don't need a whole spinning wheel. You just need a stick and a whorl. This whorl is made from bone. This is from a deer bone. It's actually one of my favorite whorls to spin with in this style. And then this is a distaff, which the distaff holds my wool while I spin so that it doesn't become disorganized or go flying around everywhere. It's also a pretty important tool, but this video isn't about distaffs, it's about spindle whorls. Aside from graves, whorls are also found in archaeological digs that may have been a center of textile production. For the Norse and many other cultures, the textile work was very gendered and it was considered women's work. Spinning was the thing that women did.
If you're new to my channel, I want to say welcome. I'm going to give you a quick little overview of some of my spindle collection so that no one feels lost as we go forward. This type of spindle is commonly referred to as a drop spindle. These have a disc-shaped whorl that is usually just up at the top by the hook, and we'll talk about how the physics of these work. I've invited a special guest to come and talk to us about these in just a moment. These are replicas of medieval whorls. This one was found in Saltfleetby and it had runes on it. Pretty cool. I have a whole video about that if you want to check it out. The originals of this type were made of lead. I have the replicas made from lead-free pewter. I don't want lead all over my hands. This kind is carved from soapstone. These would be the type that you would very commonly see in Viking Age. Norse areas would use these types of whorls. I love using these with some of my more primitive breeds of wool. It just feels right. Another type of spindle whorl that you would see would be amber, and I have this one. It goes on a shaft that is made of bogwood, so it just feels very ancient when I spin with this one. I love it. It is so beautiful. This one is similar to the whorl that was found in the Osberg burial ship, and this one is interesting because it is heavy, and I really think it would be spun supported. These are several antique spindles that I have. They are from Hungary. I just feel like I'm holding history in my hands when I spin with these. It's really, really amazing to experience them. I love this one in particular. I think that the whorl was falling off the stick, so someone shoved a little scrap of cloth in there to make sure the whorl would hold on while they were doing their spinning. Some whorls are very, very small. People ask, are you sure it's not a bead? It's not. It will have a taper if it is meant to be a whorl. The small ones were great for spinning very fine fibers. People needed thread. And check these out. These are supported spindles. They have a large, heavy whorl at the base, and they give me such a great spin.
Let's take a really close look at the physics of what a spindle whorl is doing for us so that we can understand why people were trying to figure out if the shape of the whorl would inform them of what types of textiles were being made with those whorls.
Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of Exfly Dyed Art by Science, and today I want to talk about spindle whorls, and I wanted to extend a huge thank you to Evie for allowing me the opportunity to discuss them. I used to figure skate in my youth, and my mom sent these from America to the UK so that I could have the opportunity to skate with them again. And turns out they make a lovely prop. So I'll get to that part in here in a second. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was moment of inertia. And this is a physics term that describes the amount of energy required to put an object into motion. These are the two spindles I want to talk about. They demonstrate two different concepts when it comes to the physics of spinning. In my PhD thesis, I dedicated an entire chapter discussing spindle whorls, how we can understand them in terms of physics, and also how to take into consideration the total apparatus instead of just this particular bit here, the whorl. Let's talk about the disc-shaped one, this one. The weight has been distributed more evenly across the plane, and in this spindle in particular, it's got this bronze ring around the end, which will actually help it stabilize slightly and also give it a bit more speed so that you can spin a lace yarn quite easily. So I'll show you here how it looks. Nice, smooth, almost no wobble. And there we go. Beautiful, nice, tight twists and everything. So it's exactly what I would want a spindle for making lace yarn to be. Now, when you are thinking about the physics of a spindle like this, if you are making something that needs a longer flick time, or the amount of time it's rotating before you have to grab your spindle, you want something that will go for an extended period of time. And that is exactly what this type of whorl is good at doing. And it's very much like how figure skaters, when you go into a spin, you will keep your arms out, and that will help balance you at the beginning part of the spin. Now, you can spin for a long period of time, even with your arms out, it just won't be particularly fast. That is where this spindle comes in. It's useful for spinning quickly, but not necessarily for an extended period of time. In our figure skating example, this type of spindle where they've put the main part of the mass sort of more in the center here. So if we look at it this way, you want more of the mass here so that when it spins very quickly. This is exactly like when a figure skater takes their arms and brings it in like this. They sort of drill into the ground with their skates, and it makes this wonderful like scratching noise. So it's not necessarily a long amount of time, but it is very quick and it looks super impressive. So basically that is this primary difference between these two types of spindles, and why they don't necessarily do the same types of yarn. But in my research, it has been sort of indicated that from the Iron Age in Britain, these two types of spindles may have existed simultaneously. And what's exciting then is using moment of inertia to sort of see the differences in these types of whorls to then infer how people in the past may have spun yarns.
If you are spinning something fairly thin with a heavy whorl, it means that there's a lot of tension put on it, which means that it's kind of being tested for its integrity, for its strength. And that would be important if it's going to be warp on a warp-weighted loom. That's important because you want to know that the yarn can hold up to the tension of making cloth. And that's really the whole point of all of this anyway, is making cloth was such a constant, perpetual chore.
And so this historian came up with these figures, these numbers of how much wool would have been needed. And I looked at that and I thought, he hasn't looked at this stuff. And these guys, again, if you don't make anything and if you don't understand how textile work works, you might be off a little bit here. So I thought, and I looked and I thought, let me look and see, are there, because there's a lot of women out there who are also academics who actually do spin and weave and so on. And I looked at the data that they have on that. And there was one in particular, Eva Andersen Strand, who's from Denmark. who had worked, I think, on the question of spinning and how much spinning. And she had been working with experimental archaeologists from a center in Denmark called Lejre, which is outside of Copenhagen, where that's all they do. They reconstruct things, they make things. And their conclusion, and these are based on experienced spinners, which probably in the Norse case they would have been too, because I think everybody was spinning probably from the minute you could walk, you started to learn. They came up with that set of numbers for the spinning. And then I looked at another archaeologist who had done, again, work with some experimental, in our experimental archaeology with people who were actually experienced weavers to see how much that would do. The numbers were different. And I ended up with combining all these calculations together, and I ended up with a rough estimate of how long it would actually take to make all this stuff.
And the numbers Dr. Smith came up with is that one woman working 8 hours per day would need 260 days to spin and weave 6.5 meters squared of cloth per person to clothe a family of 4. That's just the clothes. That's just the cloth. We haven't even gotten to the part where you have to sew the clothes, or that you need bed sheets and blankets and sacks to carry things in, and all of the other textile needs, which would also have to be hand spun and hand woven. The labor of creating textiles is extraordinary when you're doing every bit of it by hand.
Everybody who could spin would have to be spinning, or no one would have clothes. Like some of the earliest first communication we have, written communication, like cuneiform tablets, was between a wife and her husband, who was a trader. And he was telling her that he needed more cloth to trade and sell and make money with and stuff. And she was like, I'll give you what I give you. It's pretty funny. But, since the Industrial Revolution, we really, really don't see in a visual way what textile production is like. We don't see that the way our ancestors everywhere would have, because they never would have stopped spinning. If their hands were free, they would be spinning. There's an interweave presentation of Norman Kennedy spinning, and I love the way he says that the old folks would have been working, always working.
Now this is the older style, much older than wheel, spinning with the spindle. I'm sitting to do this, but of course, commonly people would if they're going on a journey, going to market and that, they'd be spinning all the time. Those old folks, they didn't hang out and do nothing. They were working.
And it's true. And I don't think that we have any concept of that. And part of the reason that spindle whirls as something to study and learn from, part of the reason that they got ignored, a big part of that is because of someone named Sir Woolley. And you would think with a last name like Woolley, the man would have some concept of the importance of textiles. He's considered one of the fathers of archaeology, and I have beef with him.
If I devote a special section of my text to spindle whirls, I do so with apologies. My object is simple: to clear the ground as expeditiously as possible of a mass of material of no great interest, which would otherwise obtrude unduly. The scientific importance of spindle whirls has been very much exaggerated. Today, there is no excuse for wasting space and money on this monotonous and profitless material. Sir Leonard Woolley in Alalak, an account of the excavations at Tel Achana in the Hatay, 1937 to 1949.
And as a father of archaeology, to have left us with that sentiment about whirls being valueless and profitless, that informed people who were just looking for treasures and gold and all that kind of stuff. And I think that there are sites that the whirls weren't even cataloged, because other people have gone back later and excavated in nearby places and found a whole ton of whirls. And they were like, are these centers of textile, or did everybody have these? They just weren't cataloged in these other places because they were excavated at older, previous times, and people didn't care about them because they were a profitless material. it turns out that's kind of the case. And that's such a shame, because whirls themselves, they're beautiful, they're artistic. People like working with pretty tools. That's always been the case. And they are beautiful. It informs us about the ways that women were expressing themselves and the things they kept around them. There's so much we can learn from spindle whirls. There's a quote that I think of. It's in the book Women's Work by Elizabeth Wayland Barber.
Whenever it happened, it opened the door to an enormous array of new ways to save labor and improve the odds of survival, much as the harnessing of steam did for the Industrial Revolution. Soft, flexible thread of this sort is a necessary prerequisite to making woven cloth. On a far more basic level, string can be used simply to tie things up, to catch, to hold, to carry. From these notions come snares and fish lines, tethers and leashes, carrying nets, handles, and packages, not to mention a way of binding objects together to form more complex tools. So powerful, in fact, is simple string in taming the world to human will and ingenuity that I suspect it to be the unseen weapon that allowed the human race to conquer the earth, that enabled us to move out into every eco-niche on the globe during the Upper Paleolithic. We could call it the String Revolution. Elizabeth Wayland Barber, Women's Work, the First 20,000 Years.
A lot of people will ask me, do you think I had an ancestor who was a spinner or a weaver? And people will look into their family trees and see what census declared people's professions, and they get really excited when they find someone who's a spinner. And that is exciting, and it's really cool to connect with your ancestry if you have the ability to do that for your family. That's really cool. But I want everyone to know that I think there is not a single person alive on this planet who doesn't have an ancestor who spun. Probably a whole lot of them. Because the ancient world, civilization, nothing could possibly exist without this little tool.
On its own, a stray thread cannot accomplish much. But when several fibers are twisted into yarn, and yarn into strands, and strands into string or rope, a once feeble thing becomes both strong and flexible, a hybrid material of limitless possibility. A string can cut, choke, and trip. It can also link, bandage, and reel. String makes it possible to sew, to shoot an arrow, to strum a chord. It's difficult to think of an aspect of human culture that is not laced through with some form of string or rope. It has helped us develop shelter, clothing, agriculture, weaponry, art, mathematics, and oral hygiene. Without string, our ancestors could not have domesticated horses and cattle or efficiently plowed the earth to grow crops. If not for rope, the great stone monuments of the world, Stonehenge, the pyramids at Giza, the Moai of Easter Island, would still be recumbent. In a fiberless world, the age of naval exploration would never have happened. Early light bulbs would have lacked suitable filaments. The pendulum would never have inspired advances in physics and timekeeping, and there would be no Golden Gate Bridge, no tennis shoes, no Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, Herbie Garrett Smith, the Marlin Spike Sailor.
These tiny little tools were so important that women took them to their graves because they couldn't comprehend an existence in any form that wouldn't require spinning.